right, let us try to cross over another concept of emotional health to our standard way of processing health. We would have to take I think a really good example that most people are pretty familiar with for the most part is the flight, or freeze response. This is something that is almost automatic in the person, therefore, without thought, it just happens. Because it's just happening, this means that we are not in control of it. Therefore, we're going to say it's like an autonomic or automatic response to something, right? We're going to say also that emotions are automatic. We do not control them. They kind of happen. We can have a way of trying to protect them, but this wouldn't be actually the emotional system itself. So knowing that, how does the emotional system take a look at this flight, fright, or freeze? We'd say that these three things are in service of something greater. We could simply say that the most immediate picture that these things paint is what we'd call survival, right? To protect the person from the immediate challenge. However, this is still in service of something larger than that. So there is a larger picture that's being painted. This is that of self-care, taking care or preserving the life of the individual for the long run, therefore making sure they have the ability to process this information later on when the situation is not so, let's say, charged, right? So we'd say, how does this reshape those three concepts? We'd say that first, flight, this is to take distance from. This in sense meaning that we need to disengage from this environment for a moment while we take a few steps back and we're able to see a larger picture of what's happening. This is how that would be used. Let's say fight. So fight is now we have to move towards the challenge, therefore discerning what it really is and making sure we have enough information to properly take this on next time, right? In service of a larger picture. And freeze, how does this play a role in the emotional health system? We'd say freeze then would be that of taking in the information that we currently have, giving pause to action and pause to movement, therefore having a moment of complete stillness and taking in or being able to process information. So these would be like the most immediate and sharp reactions to the emotional system. Therefore, not really the long-term version or the medium version of what this would be like. Let's take a look at the medium version. So medium version would sound a lot more like the emotional system that I explained, each having its own property. So now we're facing a problem. We have some time here to think and come up with our solution. Maybe we have a couple days to think. In this time, we could take distance from the challenge itself. Let me think about something completely different to free my mind up to then be ready to take on this task. While this is happening, other things are happening in the background and different pieces of information are able to kind of rise up to the surface so we can make new connections on the same problem. This is possible. We see that often with creative endeavors. You know, writer's block, these kind of things. When we take space, kindly, we kind of take time to then process things in a different way. This is like finding the keys after you've been looking for them forever. They just kind of pop up at some point. And the next version would be then going towards this thing. If we start putting more and more research into the challenge itself, will this reveal the amount of information needed to make a sound decision? Possibly. We still have a couple days to figure it out. So let's do some of that as well. After doing those two things, we might hit the process of freezing. Now, I don't want to take in any more information, and I really need to be focused enough to not just forget about the problem itself, because there is coming to the deadline now. And so in this way, we have now the combining of resources to be able to come up with a unique and new solution, as well as having more information, being more of a specialist on the topic itself, combining these two things to then come to our end conclusion. Now, this doesn't mean this conclusion is going to be forever. This just means based on what we know now, based on the time that we've had to relax our brains, we can come to the highest solution we have at this moment. Always in life, more experiences happen, more information is gained, therefore we can easily come to an even higher solution, if you will, later on with more time. So we'd say the long-term picture then, what does that look like with the flight, fright, or freeze response? We'd say this is a little bit more deeper thought, more space, more reflection. And in larger amounts, we take in larger amounts. And therefore, we weed out kind of the false thoughts and the things that don't particularly line up with experience. Not only our experience, but other people's experiences. Not just our research, but other people's research. Just not our reflection, but other people's reflection. After pooling all this information together, we then go about the freezing part where we start now contrasting these things and even further refining the process. You know, what part of these things are universal? Can I see this in the smaller picture, the larger picture, and the medium picture? If so, this has more of the strength in it to make a larger decision. Therefore, large decisions shouldn't be made abruptly. If we see them made abruptly and they have a, let's say, positive outcome, this is generally because of the previous experience of this person. So it seems like they're making this decision on the spot, but they might be well versed in that. This is generally why we turn to specialists in this area. They generally have the precise information because they spent the time, the years putting into the final conclusion of this thing. Now, that being said, it still has to pass the test of reality. When we implement this thing, does it have the right outcome? And if it is going to be, let's say, emotionally correct, this means sustaining life through its action, we'd say that this must have a positive outcome for all people involved. Meaning that in a situation where somebody needs to take more responsibility for their part in it, they take more responsibility. This is not a very fun or pleasant thing per se, but in the long run, it does clarify things for that person. When they're met with another situation, they take the appropriate accountability for it. They then can see the ability to make changes to this outcome. If they have a very much a lack of taking responsibility, all things happen to you and there's nothing you can do about it. You can see how that's not very emotionally strong for an individual. We want to say that we can do something about it. What is it that we can do? Try it, put that effort out. If it doesn't work out anyway, we've done as much as we can do at that point. And later on, if it's still bothering us, this probably means that we want to find further information, more research, more understanding, more experience to really understand, was that the best solution in that situation? Right? And as all things, life is about growing, so we will not start at the end. This is impossible. We do have to go through the experiences ourselves for the most part. How much challenge do you need to face to get through that experience? This becomes a little bit more personal in that sense. So this is kind of a quick example of the three main markers and how it translates, or how it better translates into the emotional realm of health, that health environment very much situated around emotion.